You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna, Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
How strong that lift is, 130. A new SEA Games record for clean and jerk, a new SEA Games record for total. At hindi pa tapos itong si Vanessa Sarno.
you just heard the sound of Filipinos snagging gold in the dying seconds of their events at the recently concluded Southeast Asia Games. From Carlos Yulo to Vanessa Sarno to EJ Obiena, Filipino athletes were at the forefront of the SEA Games. They were among a contingent of 846 athletes to the Games in Phnom Penh, Cambodia from May 5 to 17. The Philippines had a relatively dominant showing in the 2023 SEA Games, finishing 5th place with 58 gold medals, 85 silver medals, and 117 bronze medals. But here are some stories you might have missed.
The Taekwondo golds, yung kay Yulo and his teammates. That was a great story.
That's Inquirer Sports editor Francis Ochoa. We had him in Teka Teka News back in 2021 for the Tokyo Olympics, and we're talking to him again about the recently concluded SEA Games.
Yulo had a gold and a silver, and then he watched his teammates win gold medals, and he decided, I want to do one more, so he wins one more gold medal. So those were the great stories. But also on the flip side of things, I think there were some stories that deserved a lot of attention that hindi rin nabigyan.
And how could we start with anything but basketball? Justin Brownlee led Gilas Pilipinas to victory even on top of questions surrounding the playing conditions.
Okay, how we should tackle the narrative of the men's basketball team. We have to remember that this is a World Cup year, and we are hosting the World Cup. So the Southeast Asian Games really is at the bottom of priorities, no? It just so happened that na-disgrasya tayo last year. Losing last year the gold really put a lot of emphasis on this edition of the Southeast Asian Games because it's a rare thing. No? I think 33 years. So more than 3 decades since we last lost the basketball crown. So it was more of an image healing venture for the team.
Look, you might already know that since we've always been a country in love with the game of basketball. But what you might have missed was the playing conditions, which even the players had a lot to say about.
When we go to Justin Brownlee, it was really a great performance from the guy. I have to admit, no, at first I really thought na In fact, I kept asking our reporter on ground was he really having a difficult time adjusting with the heat, or were they just keeping him? It's something like a thing in international tournaments where you kind of hide some stuff of your game plan before bringing them out when the big games come. So at first, I was really skeptical about it. So I kept asking our reporters can you just double check? Can you just double check just to make sure? And kind of seemed like because they were really going through a lot of processes to cool him down a lot. So, but it was a strong performance considering that if you look at the opponent, no, they were like, he was facing 6 Americans. So the performance was great. And again, it more than the numbers that he provided. It was really the attitude that he has towards representing the country that's really worth looking at. He's always been excited to do this, and he's gone over and beyond, a busted lip in practice. And, he's really proven that he's more than willing to represent the country.
Even outside of basketball, the SEA Games a few weeks ago were chock full of storylines that only mean good things for Filipino athletes going forward. We're not just here to talk about basketball. In this episode, we wanted to shine the light on lesser known and followed sports here in the Philippines.
It feels great, man. Had an injury, Asian indoor, so was definitely concerned coming in. Had to pull out of the relays, but I'm feeling good.
Case in point, did you know that Eric Cray won his 6th consecutive gold medal for the Philippines in the 400-meter hurdles?
Eric Cray was really great bringing us the 6th medal. And the fact that he's willing to do this, train every time, very hard for the SEA Games, and all the traveling and all the training is really admirable on his part. And he's never hesitated.
In wrestling, 44-year-old playing coach Cristina Vergara came out of retirement and won gold in the women's freestyle 65 kg event. It was the 48th gold medal for the Philippines this year. But what you might not know is that her appearance was also the first time in Philippine sports history that a mother and daughter won medals in the same event. And that's fine, a lot of our sports media nearly missed that too.
When I read the story, I said, oh, sige, I was right pala. This was the former national player from decades ago. So that was the first thing that really stood out. Until, of course, as you might know by now, her daughter also won the bronze later in the same day. So we were kind of like looking for as many references as we could because we wanted to find out the rarity of the event. So credibly enough, we got enough sources naman to say na I think it's the first time that happened that a mother and a daughter won a medal in a SEA Games on the same night, on the same day. No? So we had to qualify that. So to be honest, we were actually caught by surprise by that. It's kind of like embarrassing to admit, but it was not something that we expected. Here's something you don't know about the swimming or taekwondo golds. Taekwondo, for example, won, I think there was one day where they won 4 golds in one night. So these 4 taekwondo jins, I think, si William Morrison, Alcantara, si Kurt Barbosa, and si Alora, they won golds on that late day, no? I think this was May 13, if I'm not mistaken. So they won golds late day. And then the following day, because the news cycle shifts so quick because of the medals, hindi na rin na-pursue. Because again, we had to play catch up again with who else won the gold medal the following day, di ba? So things like that, I think we should rationalize and we should streamline better. And I think really that comes with really figuring out, sige, let's try to focus on the Olympic sports tab.
In boxing, Nesty Petesio won the gold medal in the women's featherweight division, while Carlo Paalam won the gold medal in the men's flyweight division. Our Pinay martial artists too struck gold against their Southeast Asian counterparts. What about our esports team? How are they doing? Not just in the SEA Games, but in their long-term program as a whole. Here's Francis again.
There has been a rise also of a lot of gamers in the Southeast Asian region. These guys are really great at what they do. And they've been participating also in world tournaments. And the thing is, I don't know exactly what happened to esports after the pandemic, during and after the pandemic, no? Because before, these guys were really managed like a true professional team. In fact, a lot of these teams even had their own sports psychologists because can you imagine the disparity of the first place pot, the total prize, with the second place, and then you're putting the result of that game in the hands of, for example, a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, and then if he loses that game, you go from first to second. So meron silang they have this sports psychologist to talk them through all these big losses. No? So
pag-usapan naman natin si Vanessa Sarno. If you're not familiar with the name yet, it's time to start paying attention as she's considered a successor of Hidilyn Diaz. She came away with gold.
If you talk to her, she will always tell you that her goal is the Olympics. That's been her dream from the start. No? And she does realize that there's so much ground to cover before she can lay claim to being the rightful heir to Hidilyn Diaz. So, and that showed in the tournament right before the SEA Games, which was the Asian Championships. She took home 3 silvers, but if you look at the disparity between her numbers and those of China, medyo there's really a lot of ground to cover pa. But the potential is there, the promise is there, and I think more important, the eagerness and motivation is there. I mean, of course, every national athlete wants to do this for flag and country, right?
And we really need to talk about the success of our female weightlifters these days, considering where they come from. But more on that after a quick break.
Basically, they earn somewhere around 20 pesos per kilo when they sell fish. No? That means it takes like around 20 kilos to earn at least 400 pesos a day, right? Now, that is the income that they are working on.
That's Inquirer Sports editor Francis Ochoa. He's talking about the realities and conditions that weightlifters like Vanessa Sarno faced earlier on.
There is such great disparity when you realize that just 30 minutes away are Bohol's famous resorts where a slice of hanige will cost something like 1,000 pesos. So, ang layo ng disparity. So, it's very clear that their way of life is really so low, and that it's gonna be very difficult for them to climb out of it. I asked them, bakit ganun naman yung disparity? Well, the fish prices only increase once it passes from seller to middleman to resort. No? So that's the kind of life they have. No? When you look at it from the point of view that these weightlifters, during the National Open, they trained, Hidilyn Diaz went to Bohol to train in their gym. So you get to rub elbows with someone who's actually won over 100 million in incentives for her gold medal. They do understand very much. It's not something that's like an idea that weightlifting can change their life, but that added motivation of really pulling your family out, getting them a better home, and really giving them better lives. It just adds teeth to your motivation. So I think that's a story that's worth following, especially when you look at it from the point of view of what's happening with the International Weightlifting Federation right now. No?
In case you missed it, the IWF has been suspended by the International Olympic Committee. It's lost its place in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. So think about what that means for our athletes' timetables.
If you go by the history of IOC taking out sports from the Olympic calendar, normally it doesn't take just one Olympic cycle to wash and rinse off the supposed sins that the IOC is accusing it of. No? So if that suspension continues to hold for like 2 or 3 Olympic cycles, that kind of like makes Paris so urgent for the young weightlifters that we have right now, because that means by the time weightlifting is back to the Olympics, medyo they would be probably hitting a little bit past their prime now, or kahit na or they might have peaked already. So that makes the story even more worth following.
I asked him this question. As a sports editor, how do you attack those stories knowing that basketball and volleyball get most of the fan and media mileage here in the Philippines? After all, newsrooms are also incredibly limited in the manpower they can roll out. And that means the scheduling of each event matters too.
We should give credit to our athletes who competed there, but in the sense that if we only had like 15 reporters covering the SEA Games, sure, why not? But if we had one reporter on the ground and a couple more doing website surfing and social media surfing here to make sure we don't miss anything, I think the question is, the one thing we got wrong is we're too obsessed with making sure na we don't get left behind in covering the entire gold medal story. The day after the Taekwondo, if I'm not mistaken, was the first wave of boxing finalists. Because remember, we had nine fighters fighting for the gold. So our Taekwondo Jins won on a Friday night or something like that. And then Saturday, Sunday, may finals na agad sa. They were gonna play the boxing finals. So immediately, the cycle had to continue spinning. So a lot of the coverage on Taekwondo got sideswiped already. So I think that's the one thing that we have to figure out. How will we do that? How will we add more focus without totally neglecting? No, we're not saying that we should neglect the other sport.
Francis says there's still a conversation to be had in newsrooms about the role we play in promoting other sports. And that comes down to the role the fans of our athletes will have to play too.
Just because konti yung hits than basketball or volleyball doesn't mean there's none. It just drops. But there are readers there, and we just need to cultivate that, and we just need to assure them that, yeah, we're gonna be there. We're gonna give you these kind of reads. No? But again, it's kind of like a lofty ideal for a soft section, which really should be just providing entertaining reads. But who knows?
For fans, all we see is the on-court performances. But Francis says sports writers see the bigger journey leading up to that. And he thinks those spaces are something you should know about.
I've actually asked our guys sa Inquirer to give a little more attention to the sport than before. We took a family vacation in Bohol specifically, so that I could travel to Vanessa Sarno's place. So that because it's like a hotbed of young weightlifters. Like it's a small seaside compound, around 10, 12 houses. And already there are like 8 to 10 young weightlifters who are training, trying to make the national team. And to hear their stories, the high tide brings water into their houses, their roofs getting blown off during the last typhoon last December, and the difficulty making ends meet as a parang fishing industry.
A lot of these athletes struggle with the same socioeconomic issues regular Filipinos do.
It's basically a fishing town, no? So hearing her parents talk, hearing the parents of other weightlifters talk. So it was kind of like an eye opener. We've known this story long before in sports like boxing, diba? But weightlifting, almost the same. Same things that they're battling, same social problems that they're facing. Knowing that kind of background, it lends further emotional gravity to the story of Vanessa Sarno, no? Of what she has to overcome, no? But if you look all beyond that, okay, she's won gold, she still holds the SEA Games records.
The Philippines' performance in the SEA Games is a sign of the country's growing strength in sports. And while the Games prove we're still a force to be reckoned with in Southeast Asian sports, Francis says,
it was nice to listen to the whole redemption arc, but I think Philippine basketball needs to do a lot more to redeem itself than just win the SEA Games, especially since we're hosting the World Cup, no? And the fact that we've been falling into the same missteps when we prepare the national team as before, it almost seems like we're not really learning. But I think athletics has to ask itself, no? Just like every other sport who has a go-to athlete needs to ask themselves, how many more times do we have to call Eric Cray into action for the SEA Games? It's like we're asking these guys to focus too much on the SEA Games when we should be telling them, you know what, you're already so good here. Why don't we pour our effort into the Asian Games or the Olympics? But I still think that we should strike a balance between wanting to win as many golds as we can in the SEA Games and also using it as a means to introduce young athletes into the pressures of international competition. Like let's use the SEA Games to find out which players will be good enough for the Asian Games, and then eventually which players will be good enough for the Olympics.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or listen for free on YouTube. Maraming salamat po.